Good morning, Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo, and the rest of the world. You've tuned in to the Mac City Morning Show. I'm your host, Elliot Pierre, and we're going to start the show off on the same note we start every show off, with a moment of gratitude. I know you could be doing a million other things with your time, so the fact that you're spending with us truly does mean the world to me. So thank you. On that note, Tanner, hit him with the intro.
How's she cutting me, loves? You're listening to the Mac City Morning Show.
All right, we are back and we have a great guest. As you know, I do not introduce my guests. I let them introduce themselves. We had a short conversation with this gentleman months back, but he has graciously agreed to come back for a longer interview. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, sir. Tell everybody who you are and what you're about.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Lancaster Lawrence, so certainly happy to join you guys today, Elliot.
Yes.
I'm a 15-year, I would say, homer of Fort Mac. Fort
Right.
Mac's been my home for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity through engineering. That's
Yeah.
my background, my forte. And that's what's been keeping me busy for the last 15 years. Really happy to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, okay. So you were on the show when we were at Thickwood Barbershop, so it
That's
was
right.
just short a little bit of time. So I'm going to reintroduce or ask you some of the same questions that we covered before. We have better microphones now, a better system. So initially, where are you from? Because you're not from Canada, I know that.
No. And I'm sure people probably picked that up from my accent.
Yeah.
So even after 15 years, it's been tough to change my accent.
Yeah.
Originally from South Africa.
Okay.
That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was cool when we were talking off mic, I know we didn't discuss this, but the education system that you went through and how you ended up getting here to Canada is so fascinating to me. I love talking to immigrants just in general because they're so brave in regards to when you think about packing up your life, everything you know, the people, the culture, the society, and going to a different country. The bravery is on a different level. But with yourself, especially how you had to go through school, it's very different from us. You go to high school or junior high school, college, university within your country, and then you progress. It was a little bit different in South Africa. So can you explain a little bit about that? Because I don't think a lot of people know or would ever have to go through that kind of a story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's really interesting. I mean, I think the big difference was growing up in apartheid South Africa, right?
That's right.
And so I was fortunate enough to kind of experience the tail end of that. But I was pretty fortunate to go to a pretty good school.
Right.
So schooling in South Africa, unfortunately, was divided by race. So opportunities were also divided by race too.
That's right.
I was fortunate to go to a really, really good school, which then opened up some doors. So we actually had a principal, what we call a principal back home, or a headmaster.
Yeah.
And he had started the school basically for non-white people.
Okay.
Recognizing that opportunity wasn't equal, but his vision was really how could he empower people of color and give them an opportunity. So over a number of years, he was able to gain investment from elsewhere, from outside of the country,
Right.
and really built the school. But to get into the school, you had to write an aptitude test. And through the aptitude test, I was fortunate to get in and get exposed to a very different level of education. So
Right.
my parents wouldn't have been able to send me to a private school or to a good school, so to speak, would have had to rely on the public system. But I was fortunate to go to this school, and
Right.
just a very, very different experience. It taught me to think differently. It taught me to open my world as opposed to or compared to where I came from.
Right.
Where opportunities were limited,
Yeah.
challenges all the way. And then that eventually gave me the opportunity to go to university. I studied engineering, or at least mining engineering specifically.
Right.
And then, I was fortunate to get a scholarship because my parents wouldn't have been able to afford sending me to university. So
Yeah.
getting a scholarship was a dream come true,
Yeah.
which eventually led me to starting my mining career back in South Africa. I worked in the mines, probably about the deepest gold mine in the world, by the way.
Okay.
It's actually part of the Guinness Book of World Records, Western Deep Levels,
Right.
which is just outside of Johannesburg. I
Okay.
worked there for about a year and a half, and then eventually made my way into consulting.
Right.
And as I progressed my career in consulting, that's when opportunities started coming open. I started traveling across Southern Africa. I got an opportunity to work in England, Uzbekistan, which is part of Central Asia.
Yeah.
And that's what started perking my interest around opportunities elsewhere.
Right.
And eventually I started looking around. There was an advertisement in our local newspaper. It didn't say anything about Fort Mac or Sunco or anything like that.
Okay.
It was just mining engineer.
Yeah.
And I applied, and the rest is history.
That's
And here I am
awesome.
15 years later.
That's awesome. Yeah, for some of the, 'cause we have younger viewers, I look at the demographic. Some of them don't know what apartheid is. Can you explain roughly, and we're not going to get into a deep conversation about it because it's a big one. Can you roughly explain what apartheid was and is when you were there?
Absolutely. So, and I can only share my personal perspective.
That's right,
So
of course.
I'm not going to go into the politics. It's
That's
a pretty
it.
sensitive topic,
Yes.
depending on who you speak to.
Of course.
We all experience the system in different ways.
Yeah.
From my perspective, it's basically a political system
Right.
that was established in South Africa. I'd say more or less towards the late 40s into the 50s, 1940s,
Yeah.
the 1950s, where really the government at the time, as we progressed to becoming a republic, as you know, the English kind of withdrew, we became a republic in 1961,
Yeah.
and that was the system established to basically separate races,
Right.
believing that if races developed separately, they'd be better off.
Right. Right.
But obviously, it wasn't as simple as that.
That's
because
right.
with that came a lack of opportunity, because basically it was a grading system, right?
Yeah.
So everything that you did was separately. So I
Yeah.
grew up in a community of what we call colored people.
That's right.
What is better known outside of South Africa as mixed race people. But interestingly enough, mixed race people made mixed race people
Yeah. That's
during
right.
the apartheid system. So I grew up in a community of only mixed race people. So you do everything within this community.
That's
You
right.
relied on the community for social gatherings, for schooling, for churching, politics. So it was interesting. I mean, growing up, I didn't quite recognize the disadvantages, because when you were a kid, you know, you were around family, you were around friends, that becomes normal. It's
Right.
only once we actually started growing up, looking at finishing school, going to university, that you start asking questions
Yeah.
around the world.
Yeah.
You know, what is this world about? All of a sudden, because when I graduated from school in 1994, that was when we became the new South Africa. We had our first democratic elections.
Right.
And that meant I was able to go to university. And that was the first year the university actually opened up to all races.
Right.
And all of a sudden, growing up separately and then coming together and being integrated
That's right.
in 1994. So
Interesting.
fascinating experience.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, I think my view has changed as well, just having the experience I've had in Canada.
That's right. Completely different. No, fascinating to me because I come from a mixed relationship as well, and I remember like I grew up in Canada, and when you're mixed, it's you got to navigate. You got to
Absolutely.
navigate through things. You're not one of either, so you find yourself in this limbo of sometimes and trying to figure out how to belong to wherever you choose to belong to. And I remember I was young and I read Malcolm X's book, By Any Means Necessary. Phenomenal book. I've read it numerous times, loved it. The main reason I liked it so much is because he changed his convictions, which is mind-blowing to me. He was so focused on one thing. And then at the height of his fame, when most people, if like you're on a pedestal for this one thing, even if they had an internal like, oh man, I'm wrong. No, I'm famous for this thought process. I'm sticking with it. And then he's like, no, I'm willing to say I was wrong. And like, people can't do it who are normal individuals. Nonetheless, somebody who's built a career and a following. So that I was reading this book and it just was fascinating to me. And my mother said, if you like this book, you need to read Mr. Mandela's book.
Yes.
So I read that book next. And at the time, this is back in like the late 90s. So apartheid was coming, like you said, to an end. And so I would have never known about it. So I was reading this book and finding out all about it. And I'm like, this is fascinating to me. Like it's horrendous. It's not good, but it's fascinating how anybody would have thought that this would have worked and how much time and effort was put into making it work poorly.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable. It's
Absolutely.
unbelievable. So now the country is not like that anymore, but it still finds its struggles of trying to navigate through like everybody coming together.
Absolutely.
So have you had an opportunity outside of COVID, I know, to like go back home since you have moved away and made
yeah.
Fort Mac your place of residence?
Yeah, I've been home a few times.
Yeah.
It's still home
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yeah.
I kind of call Canada home too, so I'm fortunate to have two homes.
That's right.
But
Lucky man.
yeah, no, it's interesting because thinking of the journey, each time I go back, I'm different.
Right.
And it's not the same place I left because
Right.
things are changing in South Africa too. So it's
Yeah.
interesting in that, there's the whole political system, and I think South Africa is well known for its politics.
Right.
But since the politics have changed, there's a lot of social change.
Mm.
And that social change, there's good and bad.
Of
Now,
course.
it's relative.
Yeah.
I can only speak to it from my perspective, certainly
right.
not speaking on behalf of South Africans,
Yeah.
but there's been some lot of good positive developments. But there's
Right.
also some areas where, unfortunately, we're still struggling.
Yeah. Of course.
And I think that's going to be an ongoing struggle. I mean,
Yeah.
South Africa is no different to the rest of the developing world,
Yeah.
where we experience significant change.
Yeah.
And with those changes come challenges. The question is, how do we adapt to those challenges?
That's right. That's
And,
right.
and I think where South Africa is right now is, I think there is a lot of adaptation. The point is, do we have enough people?
Mm.
Do we have the right people
Yeah.
to help lead through that change? I mean, South Africa's gone through a significant brain drain.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people, including myself,
Yeah.
that's no longer in the country. And I think that has had an impact.
No doubt.
Especially for the younger generations,
Mm-hmm.
who are there to kind of help build younger people,
Yeah.
to help create that vision for the future. I think Mandela was really, really good in that he gave us hope, he inspired hope,
Right.
but he gave us the opportunity to do the work. Now the work needs to be done.
That's right.
And I think
That's
this is where we're starting to see traction in some areas, but
Yeah.
in some areas, maybe not a lot of traction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of my passions, that in the future, being a beneficiary of goodness and an opportunity,
Yeah.
hopefully at some point I'd be able to go back, as I do,
Yeah.
and hopefully give back.
That's awesome,
As I
man.
received.
That's cool. But yeah, when you have change, it's not good or bad. It just it is
Absolutely.
what it is. And Fort McMurray's gone through a lot of change. I'm born here, and I grew up in the '80s, and it was a very quiet community back then. But then all of a sudden, in the late '90s, early 2000s, it blew up. And with that came a lot of positives, money, expansion. But with that came a lot of downsides: drugs, prostitution, congested traffic, and the community grew and played with that. And now we're in a position where like the infrastructure is great, but now we're in a recession. So that infrastructure isn't necessarily needed for what you have. So I'm always interested to hear about politics from other people's countries and how they deal with things, just because not any country has it nailed down perfectly. Fort McMurray definitely didn't. Some things went well, some things didn't. But yeah, it's fascinating to me, especially South Africa. I have to say, I haven't met a single person from your country that I haven't been enamored with. When I went to college, there was two individuals, a gentleman and a female, that I was just enamored with. And when in my working world, I've had the pleasure of working with some South Africans as well. And your guys' outset on life and how you just view things to me is so interesting, because you've had to learn to navigate, put puzzle pieces together, and the way you guys think is just, I love it. I love it. I think if anything came out of that awful experiment, it's like your guys' brains and how you adapt and look at the world, I think is a huge positive. Yeah, it's amazing, man. So, and when I met you at the barbershop, Ali was just like, you got to meet this guy, Elliot. And I'm like, okay. And like, Ali never introduces me to any guys that I have to meet because I know enough people. But I remember Ali saying Lancaster is a deep guy. He has some awesome thoughts. I think you two would hit it off. And when you came on the show the first time, I'm like, holy this guy is awesome. So, dude, thank you for like keeping in contact with me and coming on the show again, because you're a super interesting guy.
No, well, I really appreciate that, and thank you for your kind words. I'm really happy to be here to share part of my story, and hopefully, share some insights in terms of what the journey's been about. And it's really interesting because I got here towards the end of my 20s.
Right.
So in my 15 years, I think my view on the world, although there's still a South African story, it's amazing to kind of merge that with my Canadian story.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in that 15 years, I must say, there's a lot of things I learned in South Africa. There's a lot of things I didn't get to learn.
Yeah.
And Canada has helped me close that gap.
There you go.
Specifically Fort Mac. I
Yeah.
should say Canada for me is Fort Mac.
Right.
This is where I landed 15 years ago, and this is where I've built a life.
Yeah.
And it's just been an amazing experience.
Yeah.
So bringing those two stories together, I think, hopefully one day I can kind of leverage that and share that with others.
Maybe write a book.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So speaking about books, like you talked about it, the reason you're here today is because you had an opportunity for education.
Yes.
And so education is paramount. And a part of education is reading. So last time we got together, you recommended a great book for me. I've never read it before. Definitely an insightful book. It kind of matched you as an individual. How do you pick books to read? I know like you obviously like reading, and that was a phenomenal recommendation. What are you into when it comes to books?
Well, I think for me, it's all about learning about human beings. That's what intrigues me the most. So I'm often into philosophy,
Okay.
history,
Yeah.
culture, because I think given the opportunity to live in a place like Fort Mac, being exposed to so many people from different walks of life, I'm always interested in their stories.
Right.
And I think that's what books gives us the opportunity to do. It's to glean into how other people view the world,
That's right.
specifically given history.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of reading, in terms of human development, human progress. How did we get to where we are today?
That's right.
And that's kind of what I enjoy tapping into.
Yeah.
Because I think learning from others just makes you that much of a richer person.
That's right. And it gives you an insight of like, hey, I've read this. I kind of know where this scenario may be going. Like I'm bad with names. It was Animal Farm, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Animal Farm was the book that you recommended.
George Orwell.
Yeah. Amazing book written so long ago. But as I'm reading this book, I'm like, I know how this is going to end. Like this doesn't end well for the other animals. And you can
Absolutely.
just see it, but it's so true upon human nature. So like a book like that, like I will definitely have he's only 6. It's too mature for him as of right now. But that's a book I'm going to get him to read when he's a teenager. Because as an adult in my late 30s, I was able to read the book and be like, oh, I know where this is going. But how valuable that would have been if I would have read that when I was 13 or 14 so that I could have navigated through life
Absolutely.
a little differently, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, education and reading books, I love it. So, but I'm not a big reader, and I'll put that on right now. I listen to books. Even when you recommended it, I got the audio book. So that's how I digest knowledge.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's switch gears for a second in regards to topics. You came into this house rocking some bangers of shoes. You came in with some Michael Jordans, some Air Jordans, nice ones too. Those are vintage Jordans. Tell me about your sneaker collection and because you obviously have to like shoes and know a little bit about shoes to be rocking Jordans that were that clean. So
Well, it's interesting. Shoes are a passion.
yeah,
And it's interesting too because living in Fort Mac, I don't always get to wear all my favorite shoes. But growing up, for me, shoes defined a person.
right,
It tells a story. Like,
Yeah.
how did you choose that pair of shoes?
right,
And to be honest, like I've got all different kinds of shoes,
Okay.
dress shoes, sneakers. But I think to me, shoes goes with how I feel,
okay,
right?
yeah,
And to be honest with you, I think I've got probably like over 40 pairs of shoes.
nothing wrong with that.
And it's just, and it's interesting because when I do see a pair of shoes, I often think about, am I ever going to see it again? Because there's a feeling that goes with it,
That's right.
right? And so that's normally what attracts me to a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
It's the story that goes with it or the story that I want to tell. I get to collect that. And then on a day, today they happen to be there. They kind of went with the look
Yeah.
in terms of my color.
Yeah.
So and you got to see them. So
Yeah, and it made me excited. That's like there's certain things, and like as humans, we're visual, right? So,
Absolutely.
and certain things just make people respond in a certain way. When I saw your shoes right away, like it just memory. Me and Tanner actually just came back from lunch, and we were talking about Michael Jordan and Space Jam and how LeBron
yes.
James has his new movie coming
Oh,
out.
yes.
So the fact that you walk in literally 7 minutes later, rocking Jordans, I was just like, what are the odds of that? So yeah, shoes are one of those things that people like take a look, and well, not everybody, but Me personally.
Absolutely.
I appreciate a nice white pair of Air Jordans.
Oh yes.
I have this shoe that I'm trying to get right now. And when I say trying to get, I'm hoping somebody who's watching will purchase them for me and send them in. Or maybe Nike will send them to me. I'm rocking some Nikes right now. Um, they're the Ben and Jerry Dunks.
Okay.
So they're these Nike shoes. It's a collaboration with Ben and Jerry, the ice cream company. And they're an amazing, weird looking shoe. They're not everybody's taste.
Okay. Okay.
But because of sneaker culture, these shoes are valued at like $5,000 American.
No way.
Yeah. So
Wow.
initially to buy them, it's just like any pair of Jordans, or not Jordans, Nikes, $120. But because they're limited and people wanted them, and sneaker culture, yeah, to get a pair of these shoes is $5K.
Wow.
So I'm hoping somebody at home wants to give me the shoes. I promise I'll wear them every day on the show if you send them my way. So yeah, shoes are cool, man. But you got some
No,
bangers
thank
of
you, Elias.
shoes.
Well, it's really interesting. I only learned the other day that you actually get to, there's companies that collect sneakers,
Oh yeah.
and it's quite a thing.
Yeah, it's a big thing, and it's a blessing and a curse, and that's why the shoes I want are so expensive is because of these people.
Yes.
And I've mentioned the Air Dunks by Nike, Ben and Jerry, a few times now on the show, and I've said I will wear them, and people just look at me like you can't wear that. Like you have to put it on
Oh,
a shelf,
yes.
and it's a
Oh, yes.
collectible. Like the value will drop as soon as you wear it, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna wear it.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm gonna wear it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's a big thing with sneaker culture. On that note, though, I'm hogging the show. Tanner, you have a segment called the Mac City Minute. Hit our man up with your question, sir.
Alrighty, question number 1. What is one way Fort McMurray reminds you of South Africa?
Diversity.
Question number 2. What does the mines in Canada and the mines in South Africa share in common?
Wow. Well, I've only worked in an open pit mine here and underground in South Africa, so I'd say not much.
Question number 3. What is your favorite story from traveling around the world before getting to Fort McMurray?
Learning about people, cultures.
Question number 4. What was it like being part of the first class of mixed race people in university in South Africa?
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And your final question. What do you remember from your first time coming to Fort McMurray and being in Canada?
Not seeing any houses, just seeing a forest, flying over a forest and not knowing where I'm going.
And those have been your 5 questions.
Let's keep on that last topic. My parents come from Guyana, South America. And my mom has a story, and I won't tell the story. Hopefully one day my mom will come on the show and tell it herself. But the first time she saw snow, the weather here from South Africa, obviously extremely different.
Absolutely.
How did you deal with the weather when you first got here?
Well, it was interesting because I eased into it. I got here in the fall.
Okay.
Right? So, kind of easing into winter, didn't really know what to expect.
Right.
So the fall came, and to me, fall was really cold. So yeah, I was with the beanie and the gloves and the big jacket, and everyone's still kind of sporting like t-shirts and like, what's up with this guy kind of thing, right? So, I mean, and it's interesting because I think your body adapts.
Right.
So when I first got here, the fall was really, really cold. Getting into winter itself, I found what was fascinating was just feeling snow, not really knowing what snow felt like.
Right.
Because you normally see people ski, but they're not getting wet. And in my mind, you should be getting wet, right?
Right.
So I think feeling snow and just kind of getting that experience was pretty unique for me. And then the other thing was the darkness. That was the piece I wasn't prepared for. And even till today, like, I don't mind the cold.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy the cold.
Yeah.
Making the best of it. Like they say, there's no such thing as a bad weather day for a proud Canadian, right?
That's right.
So getting
Yeah.
out and making the best of every day, but I do struggle with the amount of sunlight
That's right.
or the lack of sunlight.
That's right.
And I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
Okay. Yeah, on the flip side, though, we get long days in the summer. We're coming
That's
up
right.
this weekend, actually,
Absolutely.
longest day of the year. So I think it's this weekend. I could be wrong. But I got ripped off when we used to go to South America because I grew up here. So I remember my trip as a young adult. I was 14. We went to South America for the summer. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be hot. It's going to be great. And then it gets dark at 5 o'clock. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then my parents in a third world country are not letting me out in the dark. So I'm just like, everything got locked down at 5, and I was behind gates and stuff, and I'm like, this is brutal.
Oh yes.
So yeah, when you travel to different countries, depending on climate and like longitude, latitude, things are very different.
Absolutely.
So you thought you'd be wet with the snow.
Oh yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, we're going to end the show off on that note because I know Tanner hit his watch a little while ago, so we've hit the 20-minute mark. Lancaster, thank you very much for coming in today. Truly is a pleasure. I have to say that. And unfortunately for the guests, we're going to be turning off the camera, but you and I are going to continue to chat. But anytime you want to come back, I'll continue inviting you. I would love for you to come back and continue the conversation with us, man.
And thank you for having me. It's been an absolute blast.
Cool. Sweet. All right. Well, Fort McMurray and Wood Buffalo, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of the Mac City Morning Show. Hopefully you had a great day. Thank you once again. I know you could be doing tons of other things with your time, so it does mean the world to me that you spend it with us. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.
I said this. That's another Mac City Morning Show done.
It's so ballistic!
Talk about quenching your ugly thirst.